Hi, welcome to The Church. This is a video podcast where we discuss contemporary challenges and apply biblical solutions. The way this program works, it's just like a 15-minute or so podcast where we're going to discuss some contemporary issues and just find some biblical solutions. We may not have all of the answers, but we're going to get the answers from the right place, and we'll just go from there. Okay, welcome. Hope you can hear me. Welcome to the church. Okay, yeah, this is the only Mel Cruz. So listen, I'm back again, and this book of Judges, I'm trying to tell you, which I said in the other video, this is reminiscent of kind of like what we have going on today in our society in terms of the temperature, the political environment, and the sentiment, if you will. So please like, share, subscribe this video, replay gang, leave a comment. I want to hear from you. I want to get right into it. And what I really want to do is just thoroughly get into some of the historical pieces, okay? Just so that there's some clarity here. And I think in doing that, you'll see why it looks like, this could really be today. This really could be today's age. But anyway, let's get into it. So again, I'm reading out of the Life Application Study Bible, the NIV, and I'm also reading out of the Tony Evans Bible Commentary. And I want to say this too. The last show I did, I think it was last week, I was talking fast. I hadn't been on here in a minute, and da 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 da. I left some significant things out. So I'm really, my intention was to kind of like go onto the community or the post page and kind of clear up some of the things that I left out or made to make clear. So be looking for that. But anyway, let's get into this Book of Judges. Some of the key pieces in here actually cover Joshua, because again, when Judges starts, this is when Joshua led the Israelites over into the Promised Land, into the land of Canaan. So we're going to kind of discuss a little bit about Joshua, the Canaanites, and Adoni Bezek. And I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. I know y'all going to forgive me for any names that I mispronounce. But with that being said, some interesting information about the book of Judges. Judges is a book about heroes, 12 men and women who delivered Israel from its oppressors. These judges were not perfect. In fact, they included an assassin, which we covered that guy last week. His name was Ehud. They included an assassin, someone who doubted God, and a sexually promiscuous man. Not quite sure who that is, but I guess we're going to find out. But they were submissive to God, and God used them. Judges is also a book about sin and its consequences, like a minor cut or abrasion that becomes infected when left untreated. Sin grows and soon poisons the whole body. The book of Joshua ends with the nation taking a stand for God, ready to experience all the blessings of the Promised Land. After settling in Canaan, however, the Israelites lost their spiritual commitment and motivation. When Joshua and the elders died, the nation experienced a leadership vacuum, leaving them without a strong central government. Instead of enjoying freedom and prosperity in the Promised Land, Israel entered the dark ages of her history. Now, simply stated, the reason for this rapid decline was sin, individual and corporate. So the first step away from God was incomplete obedience. The Israelites refused to eliminate the enemy completely from the land. This led to intermarriage, idolatry, and everyone doing as they saw fit. And remember, that is one of the common refrains. And in those days, men did as they wanted to, or men did as they saw fit. Before long, the Israelites became captives. Out of their desperation, they begged God to rescue them in faithfulness to his promise, and out of his loving kindness, God would raise up a judge to deliver his people. And for a time, there would be peace. Then complacency and disobedience would set in, and the cycle would begin again. And it's just so interesting. It's like when you're going through hard times and you're like, okay, Lord, please, Jesus, please, please, please work this out. Fix this thing for me, Lord. And he fixes it, and you forget about the time that you was, begging God to fix your situation. And we go back to complacency, or we go back to the very same thing that got us jammed up in the first place. Now, why we're like that, I don't know. It's got to be a default mechanism in a human being. But hey, these Israelites certainly had it. So the book of Judges spans a period of over 325 years, recording 6 successive periods of oppression and deliverance, and the careers of 12 deliverers. Their captors included the Mesopotamians, the Moabites, the Philistines, the Canaanites, the Midianites, and the Amorites. God used a variety of deliverers, from Othniel to Samson, to lead his people to freedom and true worship. God's deliverance through the judges is a powerful demonstration of his love and mercy toward his people. And here's my thing. This is, and you get in the comments and let me know. Hey, yeah, Mel, yep, yeah, this could be today's day and age. But I kind of feel like that's where we are right now. Our country, our land, us human beings, the world, we are disobedient. And I'm not going to, I mean this to those who are believers in Jesus Christ. If you don't believe in him, then, I guess this doesn't count for you. But for those who are believers in Christ, and if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, then to me, this is why we are where we are in society and in the world. Um, and so when we're looking at how are we going to fix this, because let's look at what's going on politically right now. I was talking to some family members yesterday. I said, you know what, we talk about all of these uh, temporal things, secular things that we can do to make our society better. And really, if you look at it, there's no way, there's no fixing this thing. The only way this world is going to be fixed, when we look at all the things that are going on politically and socially right now, the only way this thing is going to get fixed is through Christ Jesus. That's it. Just it. That's all. And I know some people who are non-believers. Girl, shut up. But that's the only way, because everybody. I mean, this is turned. Look. Well, anyway, let me keep reading. Let's see. So as we read the book of Judges, take a good look at these heroes from the Jewish history. Note their dependence on God and obedience to his commands. Observe Israel's repeated downward spiral into sin, refusing to learn from history and living only for the moment. But most of all, stand in awe of God's mercy as he delivers his people over and over again. So, yeah, I don't know. That's given today's day and age. Um, One thing while I was doing this little bit of study here, we all know about Gaza right now. And while I was getting these things, key places in Judges, Gaza is one of the key places in Judges, and it's actually where Samson was blinded and led captive to a prison in Gaza. And if you're familiar with Samson, then you know that once Delilah ran that game on him and ended up getting his hair cut. Um, when they took him over there to Gaza and put him in the prison. And remember, if you're familiar with the story, all he did was walk around that circle, tethered to a turnabout, if you will, and that was to keep the wheel going in order to, I believe, to grind some grain or something of that nature. Um, but while he was there, his hair began to grow again. And after a while, the Philistines held a great festival to celebrate Samson's imprisonment and to humiliate him before the crowds. And when he was brought out as the entertainment, he literally brought down the house when he pushed on the main pillars of the banquet hall and killed the thousands trapped inside. The prophecy that he would begin to free Israel from the Philistines had come true. So, yeah, so that's a present day scenario that is currently in the news, not for Samson, but it's currently in the news. And so, for those who's like, oh man, that Bible's a joke, ain't nobody, ain't no such a thing. Yeah, I don't know. Better ask somebody. But let's keep it moving. Um, okay, so the people of Israel had finally entered and taken control of the land promised to their ancestors. And the book of Judges continues the story of this conquest that began in the book of Joshua. Through God's strength, the Israelites had conquered many enemies and overcome many difficulties, but their work was not yet finished. They had effectively met any political and military challenges, but facing spiritual challenges was more difficult. The unholy but attractive lifestyle of the Canaanites proved more dangerous than their military might. The Israelites gave into the pressure and compromised their faith. If we attended, or as you were, if we attempted to meet life's challenges with human effort alone, we would find the pressures and temptations around us too great to resist. And I think that might be a good part of the reason why our society is like it is, because we're not calling on God. We're surrounded by temptations and pressures, and we're afraid to stand up. There, people are afraid to tell Trump no, or tell Trump yes, or whatever. They're or run for office um and be honest about it, or whatever. I mean, because I'm not really trying to make this all political, but I really want to draw the stark uh, um, commonalities, if you will, between then and now, and between then and now, what's the common denominator? The Israelites, the people, the believers, were disobedient. They leaned to their own understanding. They decided, hey, you know what, we just gonna get it how the Canaanites live. It's easier that way. We don't have to be obedient to God. We don't have to we don't have to do what we have to do. And the crazy part is that was the Israelites' promised land. So to me, and it's easy for me to say this, if I were there, I'd probably be the chief cheerleader talking about, come on, y'all, let's get this sin in. You know what I mean? I don't want to come off like, I'm so holy and, oh Lord, Jesus, I never committed sin. I'm not trying to project that at all. But you would think that after you went 40 years in the wilderness, and if you weren't 40 years in the wilderness, they had some ancestors who spent time in the wilderness. And so you would think that after that, and knowing what the conditions were like prior to coming out of the wilderness, remember Pharaoh, let my people go. They cried out to God then. So you would think that once God, after all that, and God put you over here in this good promised land, land of milk and honey, that you'd be, getting it how you live. But, you know, and I guess like it says here that when they first went over there and Joshua was still alive, they did. They did. They was living large. So anyway, let me just keep reading. Um, Soon after Joshua died, Israel began to lose its firm grip on the land. Although Joshua was a great commander, the people missed his spiritual leadership even more than his military skill. For he had kept the people focused on God and his purposes. Joshua had been the obvious successor to Moses, but there was no obvious successor to Joshua. That's interesting. During this crisis of leadership, Israel had to learn that no matter how powerful and wise the current leader was, their real leader was God. We often focus our hope and confidence on some influential leader, failing to realize that in reality, it is God who is in command. Acknowledge God as your commander in chief and avoid the temptation of relying too heavily on human leaders, regardless of their spiritual wisdom. The Canaanites were all the people who lived in Canaan, which again was the promised land. They lived in city states, which each city had its own government, army, and laws. One reason Canaan was so difficult to conquer was that each city had to be defeated individually. There was no single king who could surrender the entire country into the hands of the Israelites. So I can see how that would make it challenging for the Israelites to get in there, you know, uh, beat them down real good, and then enjoy all of that promised land. Because there it goes on in scripture here, um, where they were steadily tussling. It wasn't like the Canaanites were some pushovers, because it was not that. Canaan's greatest threat to Israel was not its army, but its religion. Canaanite religion idealized evil traits, cruelty in war, sexual immorality, selfish greed, and materialism. It was a me first, anything goes society. Obviously, the religions of Israel and Canaan could not coexist. And so to me, it's interesting that, you know, I wonder why Joshua didn't plan for his replacement. I wonder why that was. Like, why didn't that happen? And why wasn't there anyone why weren't they looking forward? Huh, that's interesting. So the book of Joshua tells of a swift and thorough conquest of enemy armies and cities, while the book of Judges seems to suggest a more lengthy and gradual conquest. When the Israelites first entered the promised land, that's in Joshua 1 and 1 through 12, they united as one army to crush the inhabitants until they were too weak to retaliate. Then, after the land was divided among the 12 tribes, each tribe was responsible for driving out the remaining enemy from its own territory. The book of Judges tells of their failure to do this. Some tribes were more successful than others. Under Joshua, they all began strong, but soon most were sidetracked by fear, weariness, lack of discipline, or pursuit of their own interests. As a result, their faith began to fade away, and everyone did as they saw fit. In order for our faith to survive, it must be practiced day by day. It must penetrate every aspect of our lives. Beware of starting out strong and then getting sidetracked from your real purpose, which is loving God and living for Him. That's supposed to be the goal. And then so in the title, I mentioned a man right here. Wait, here we go. Adoni Bezik. Beziek or something like that. So let me see if I can get to where his story picks up, so that we can kind of get in, because this is one of the reasons why the Israelites were jacked up. What they did with this guy here. So let me just start with Ezra, Judges, chapter 1, starting with verse 1. After the death of Joshua, the Israelites asked the Lord, "Who of us is to go up first to fight against the Canaanites?" The Lord answered, "Judah shall go up. I have given the land into their hands." The men of Judah then said to the Simeonites, their fellow Israelites, "Come up with us into the territory allotted to us to fight against the Canaanites. We in turn will go with you into yours." So the Simeonites went with them. Just a minute, turning this page. When Judah attacked, the Lord gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hands, and they struck down 10,000 men at Bezek. It was there that they found Adoni Bezek, who fought against him, putting to rout the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Adoni Bezek fled, but they chased him and caught him and cut off his thumbs and big toes. Now, here we're about to get into the finest detail and obedience. Then Adoni Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off have picked up scraps under my table. Now God has paid me back for what I did to them. They brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. The men of Judah attacked Jerusalem also and took it. They put the city to the sword and set it on fire. So the maiming of Adoni Bezek was one example in a long string of actions that demonstrated Israel's tendency to disobey God's instruction, uh, to disobey God's instructions by only giving partial obedience. Enemy kings were supposed to be executed, not humiliated. This defeated king recognized God's righteous punishment more clearly than God's people acknowledged God's commands. When we understand what God tells us to do, we run great danger if we don't carry out both the letter and the spirit of his words. Although the Israelites conquered Jerusalem, they did not occupy the city until the days of David. This same event is recorded in Joshua, um, where Caleb was one of the original spies who had scouted out the promised land, and with Joshua encouraged the people to conquer it. For his faithfulness, he was given the land of his choice. Why did God order the Israelites to drive the Canaanites from their land? Although the command seems cruel, the Israelites were under God's order to execute judgment on those wicked people. The other nations were to be judged for their sin as God had judged Israel by forcing them to wander for 40 years before they were allowed to enter the promised land. Over 700 years earlier, God had told Abraham that when the Israelites entered the promised land, the gross evil of the native people would be ready for judgment. But God wasn't playing favorites with the Israelites because eventually they too would be severely punished for becoming as evil as the people they were ordered to drive out. God was not partial to all, or as you were, God is not partial um, at all. People are eligible for God's gracious forgiveness as well as for his firm justice. So one of the other struggles that they had in that these Israelites had in clearing out these folks out of Canaan, um, is that the Canaanites had chariots pulled by horses, and I think they were made of iron. It says Canaanite chariots pulled by horses were among the most sophisticated weapons of the day. Israelite foot soldiers were absolutely powerless when a speeding iron chariot bore down upon them. This is why Israel preferred to fight in the hills where chariots couldn't venture. Tribe after tribe failed to drive the evil Canaanites from their land. Why didn't they follow through and completely obey God's commands? Here are three reasons why, according to this Life Application Study Bible. One, they'd been fighting for a long time and were tired. Although the goal was in sight, they lacked the discipline and energy to reach it. Two, they were afraid the enemy was too strong. The iron chariot seemed invincible. Three, after Joshua's death, power and authority were decentralized to the tribal leaders and the tribes were no longer unified in purpose. And four, spiritual decay had infected them from within. They thought they could handle the temptation and be more prosperous by doing business with the Canaanites. Now, one other point, and then I'm going to wrap this up. Um, One of the reasons we talked about how they had marched against the city called the beer. Let me get to that part real quick. Let's see. So yeah, so the men of Judah attacked Jerusalem, also and took it. They put the city to the sword and set it on fire. After that, Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites living in the hill country, the Negev, and the western foothills. They advanced against the Canaanites living in Hebron, formerly called Kiartha Arba, and defeated Shishai, uh, Ahamin, and Talamah. From there, they advanced against the people living in Debir. And Caleb said, I will give my daughter Ashka in marriage to the man who attacks and captures uh, Debir. Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, took it, so Caleb gave his daughter Ashka to him in marriage. And we kind of covered that in the last one. So here's the thing about the city Debir. They marched against the residents of Debir, which was also called Kiratha Sefer. Debir comes from the Hebrew word that means word, and Caritha Sefer means the city of the scribe. This place, Debir, this was the town where the records of the Canaanites were held. It was the repository for details about their history, culture, and background. To destroy Debir would be to destroy their history and their culture. The Canaanites would defend this city vigorously. So, I mean, to be honest with you, that kind of says the Israelites' ancestors, our ancestors, went through the wilderness 40 years after being freed from Pharaoh, that oppressive situation. We get over here to the promised land, the land of milk and honey. We enjoy a little bit of success as long as Joshua and his crew was alive. Joshua passes away, and everything just goes to, folks just got comfortable. They got comfortable with it all. They liked what the Canaanites was doing over there. They get comfortable, and then although they're still trying to fight, they gave up. They said, "Man, we can't beat these folks in these chariots." But the people in the chariots, the Canaanites, they was like, "Look, y'all not about to tear our stuff down. You're not about to tear our city Debir down and do away with our history." Hello, taking CRT out the schools and such. The Canaanites said, "No, we ain't gonna let you have that. We're gonna fight you," and that's exactly what they did. So I don't know if you see any resemblance into today and and back then. Leave a comment in the chat. I think it's quite obvious. Our country, our morals, our values, they're gone to hell in a handbasket. And then are we tired? Have we just given up? Are we like, you know what, forget it, man. I just, it's whatever, man. Just, pass me the, marijuana's legal everywhere. Pass me the, let me do all the, whatever. Let me just do all these immoral, illegal, illicit things. And, hey, this is what it is. Is that, it's looking like that to me. I don't know. But I'd like to know what your thoughts are. So that's it. That is the podcast. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. Replay gang, leave a comment. I want to hear from you. I'll be back again, hopefully next week or sooner. And we're going to get into some more of this book of Judges. I'm trying to draw these parallels to see if anybody else can see how it looks. I mean, change a couple names. Hey, it looks like what's going on today. So until next time, y'all, we will see ya when we see ya. Hi, welcome to the church. This is a video podcast where we discuss contemporary challenges and apply biblical solutions. The way this program works, it's just like a 15-minute or so podcast where we're going to discuss some contemporary issues and just find some biblical solutions. We may not have all of the answers, but we're going to get the answers from the right place, and we'll just go from there.